Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we have new broadcast locations today from Placida, Florida, which is in Charlotte County on the west coast of Florida, and from the great state of Georgia, the suburbs of Atlanta. Gary Demar, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. Happy to have you with me today.
Always good to be back with you, Mark.
Hey, listen, Gary, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, and I want to start with this. We've seen a lot of anti-Semitism. We've seen the stuff on college campuses. We've seen marches against the Jewish people. This has happened not only across the globe in places like London, Istanbul, Muslim countries. It's happened in the United States, college campuses, New York City, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. Gary, finally, the good guys, in my opinion, are fighting back today with a march in Washington, over 100,000 people supporting Israel, with speakers like Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Hakeem Jeffries, United States senators from the Republican Party, Chuck Schumer, a bipartisan support for the state of Israel. Gary, give me your impressions of today, what we saw at the mall in the Capitol, and your opinion about some of this garbage we've seen on these college campuses lately.
I think one of the things we need to keep in mind here, this has been festering for a very, very long time, and it took something like this to bring it out. It's not like all of a sudden the responses by these groups on college campuses all of a sudden rose to the top. This is something that's been going on for a very long time, and a number of interesting things have taken place. You have a number of high-profile donors who are pulling their donation support from many of these colleges, at Harvard and some of the other ones. And another is there are a number of law firms who are going to refuse to hire people who have come out for pro-Hamas, which I think is another good thing. And all of these things are hitting the American people in a way that they've never been hit with this kind of stuff before. I think there's a wake-up call here. The very fact that you called this a bipartisan support, I think the Democrats are scared to death because they were silent at the very beginning of this. They wanted this kind of equity position between Israel and Hamas, and maybe we need to, they need to have ceasefire and so forth. And I think they saw the writing on the wall here that they're finally coming out and taking a pro-Israel stance in all of this. And I think this is happening in other areas as well. I think we probably won't get to all of this, but we're seeing it on this gender stuff where you got in sports, men are taking over women's spots in sports, and there's some backlash with that. There was a woman just recently who was in a pool tournament, and she was very high seed, and she ended up saying, "I'm forfeiting. I'm giving up. I'm not going to compete against a man in what is an all-women's event." So I think this is a wake-up call for many Americans, and I think it's also a wake-up call for the Democrat Party, because which fundamentally most Jews have voted for Democrats. And then you got the Muslims here in the United States. Who are they going to vote for? So this is going to be. I think this is going to have some effect on the election in 2024.
There's no question it's going to have an effect on the election. Look, Joe Biden was getting a lot of heat from the left, and folks, we always say, we cut through the propaganda on this show. Well, I disagree with Joe Biden on multitude of issues. But on this case here, Gary, he has actually, to a degree, stood up to the very far left-wing radicals in his party, and he has said, no, we are going to support Israel. I know he's pushed for a ceasefire. I can tolerate him asking for that, knowing, of course, that it's not going to happen, and that Netanyahu has agreed to safe zones, to stop the shelling for a period of hours, to allow humanitarian aid to cross into Gaza and to allow citizens to move. but he has resisted calls for a complete ceasefire. Now, maybe the prior conversations are different, but publicly he has been out saying that. And I at least have to respect the president for standing up to these far left-wing radicals in his party, of which the majority of whom are being really ripped apart by what I would call centrist Democrats. Now, will it have an effect? It may have an effect, but Gary, at the end of the day, I look out maybe in a year from now in November, I'm saying, okay, who are these far left-wing radical Democrats going to vote for? Will they come home for Joe Biden, or will they vote for Cornel West? Will they vote for Jill Stein, or will they simply stay home? I don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah, I don't either, but I'm a little more cynical. I don't trust the Democrats. I don't, and I have a good bit of distrust of the Republicans. And my guess is that they did a bit of internal polling and began to find out that the Jewish community was upset. I mean, you had students,
probably him.
Barricaded in a library because fearful to come out because of the mobs that were out there. And who knows what the donor class was like in terms of the Jewish community regarding the Democrat Party. So I'm glad to see that there's this bipartisan support here, but I'm still a little cynical as to what's really behind it. This is politics as usual. For the Democrats, it's the wet finger in the wind to see which way the winds are blowing, and I think they've just taken that particular avenue. But we'll have to see what actually takes place in terms of long range with all of this.
Well, Gary, knowing your skepticism of Democrats, as I've known you for many years, I'm actually saying, wow, a metamorphosis here a little bit. Gary's actually giving an inch or two, but deep down inside, skepticism is right below the surface. So, folks, don't let Gary's opinions jade you here. He is a rock solid conservative, and I'll leave it for Gary Demar to give Democrats a little bit of credit. Folks, that's like moving mountains.
So, yeah, that's suspicious. Yeah, suspicious credit. So
I can see that. Well, Gary, what was really great. Okay, and we did see 100,000 people out there on the mall in Washington D.C. today. And I got to tell you, as an American, I'm really proud of those citizens that have come out to support Israel. I think it's been an absolute disgrace, again, what's happened on these college campuses. Yeah, can we control what happens with marches in London, Istanbul, other countries? No. And particularly in the East. But when here at home, I was actually shocked at the anti-Semitism taking place on these campuses. And I'm glad to see some support coming in such large numbers. And Gary, we've both said about the bipartisan natureship. It's hard to get anything bipartisan in our country, but to have literally the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, given passionate speeches, both of them, in support of Israel, I think that's an impressive event that took place. And I, as an American, am happy that our country is fully supporting Israel. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the war with Hamas, Gary. It's your typical Hamas thing. They use hostages. They use hospitals. They fire at their own people. They try to blame Israel. But on the military campaign itself, the Israelis are having quite a bit of success rooting out these Hamas terrorists.
Yeah, and look, this is necessary, and it's saddening to what we're seeing even within Gaza. But I think I watched this short video the other day about where are all these young anti-Semitic people getting their news, their anti-Israel material, and it's coming from places like TikTok. And so they're only hearing the Hamas a pro-Gaza approach to this, the Islam approach to all of this. And so they're getting a false narrative of what's actually taking place there. And then you'll get dribbles coming out of what's from Israel about the approach that they're taking in order to hunt down these Hamas murderers. But again, these tunnels are underneath, hospitals. We hear stories about the Hamas terrorists shooting people who are trying to escape to get away from them. They continue to use innocent citizens as shields in order to keep the Western basic fundamental Christian values in check. And I think Israel is probably doing the best they can given the circumstances.
Yeah, I echo what you're saying there, Gary. And the Israeli government, they have a plan. They're executing their plan. I saw pictures of them taking over a Hamas headquarters. I mean, I have to applaud the Israeli military. Look, they've suffered casualties. This war has not been without casualties. Last count I saw, 47 Israeli soldiers had been killed. So it's not without bloodshed on the Israeli side, Gary. But this is an event that has to happen. You cannot have a neighbor next to you where 1,400 citizens are raped, brutalized, babies are murdered, heads are cut off, body pieces, torture. I mean, that can't exist. So the fact is, its time has come. The Israelis are executing on their plan. And I believe this is not only Republicans, folks, supporting, but it is bipartisan support for Israel, as it should be. Yes, are there a few radical left Democrats against this, like the Rashida Tlaibs and the Ilhan Omars? Sure there are. But for the most part, Gary, I have to applaud both parties for their support. Let me ask you this. I want to turn.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to turn politically to the aid now, because we have two aid packages. We have the aid package to Israel and we have the aid package to Ukraine. They're separated right now. Gary, how do you think Congress is going to react to this? Because you have bipartisanship in both Senate and the House that want to pass this aid. How do you see it playing out? Will it be separate bills? Will Israel get their aid? Will Ukraine? How do you handicap this?
Well, again, this is the way Congress works. The Senate works on all this. It's like they want to do this package deal because they know there are some who support Ukraine and some who don't support Ukraine. You got some people most of them are going to support Israel. So if they can create a package where they can get the money for Ukraine by support that's coming out for Israel, they're going to put the package together. And I think they should be separate. I think Ukraine is a disaster from the get-go, and I don't know what the solution is going to be with all of this. But pouring more and more money into this, I don't think is the solution to it. I'm reluctant to give aid to anyone these days. It's horrendous about who makes the money with all of this stuff.
Well, the one thing I really like, I'm not. We're going to talk a little bit about this after the break when we get into the politics, but I do like the way the Republicans have talked about. Look, there may be aid for Israel, there may be aid for Ukraine. I get the feeling the aid for Ukraine is going to be more military equipment rather than dollars if that happens. And the aid for Israel, I do think will get passed because there's such overwhelming support for it. How it's going to play out, that I don't know. But, folks, we're going to be back in about 60 seconds. We're going to take a little break, and then Gary and I are going to talk about the political implications of what all this means.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900.
We're on camera.
Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity and have now become very dangerous places to hold your assets. Get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, at 720-605-3900.
Folks, we're back, and I want to get on to talk about the political implications about what's happening. I really want to focus on the Republican Party. Gary, Sunday night, Senator Tim Scott announced he was suspending his campaign, effectively withdrawing from the race. You had Asa Hutchinson and Governor Doug of North Carolina, who didn't qualify for the last debate. It appears to me we're really down to 4 potential challengers. You have Vivek Ramaswamy and Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley. And those 4 clearly have the money, the name recognition, and the polling right now to continue on as we move forward. My personal opinion is I think it's really down to 2. And I think that's Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Now, Chris Christie could prove me wrong by doing great in New Hampshire. Ron could prove me wrong by doing well in both. He has the money, he's got the youth, he's got the energy. But Gary, having multiple people, whether it's just 2 or 3 or 4, once the caucuses in Iowa come about, and then New Hampshire and South Carolina, correct me if I'm wrong, but unless we have one alternative, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to challenge Donald Trump because of his current commanding lead of a minimum of 30 points in the current polling.
Oh, I agree. I think Chris Christie is toast. I don't think he has any chance. He just doesn't have the personality. He doesn't come across as somebody you'd like to want to sit down and have dinner with. Nikki Haley, I don't know. I know she's popular in some areas, and DeSantis. I don't think he. Again, I really, my personal opinion is this is all about the vice presidency. Who would Trump pick as a vice president choice? And I think that's what this is all about. And I think Tim Scott did the right thing. I think now he becomes a better pick in terms of vice presidency because he's kind of deferred to Trump. He says, "Man, Trump's the man," and my guess is he's probably fairly high up on the Trump's list in terms of a vice president candidacy. I don't think Trump would pick Nikki Haley at all. I think DeSantis made the mistake of getting into this race from the very beginning. His best job was to turn Florida around, and he did it. And he really should have continued to focus on that for at least another 4 years.
There's some talk. Again, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis. Obviously, Tim Scott acquitted himself quite well in the race. Very respectful. And even when he bowed out on Trey Gowdy's show the other night, he did it in a respectful way, just basically saying, now is not my time. But that doesn't mean the future. Tim Scott has an incredibly bright future. He's a star in the Republican Party. I would say the same thing for Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. They're both stars within the party. And look, we never want to pick races before the voters have had a chance to vote, Gary. We know that lesson. We've seen it. But all indications are right now that unless you say unless something happens, well, 91 indictments. I mean, seriously, folks. Yeah. I mean, what else can they throw at the man? They're trying to take his bit away from him in New York on completely, no pun intended, folks, trumped up charges. These politicians have no idea what these buildings are worth. For some of them to say Mar-a-Lago was worth $8 million, these people are nuts. Mar-a-Lago could be pushing 9 figures easily at that particular time. So for us to sit here and question what buildings are worth, when banks loaned on them, and Gary, again, unless I'm missing something, Trump didn't default on these loans. They were paid back. No one got stiffed. Right. Yeah. It's not like what happened in the crypto world where the crypto kids stiffed billions from people.
Yeah, these banks aren't stupid. They're not stupid. You're an investor. You're working in terms of companies. Hey, we're going to buy this company. We're going to merge with this company. You're not going to take their word for it. You're going to show me your assets. I want to see what I'm buying here. And
Right.
so
And the banks have appraisers. They appraise these
yeah,
properties. They look at the cash flow. So to me, okay, yeah, it's a judge is going to make a decision, fine. But at the least, these are distractions against Trump. Now, I have a theory on this, Gary. Trump actually dealing with these distractions, being in the courthouse, lambasting a judge, doing the things that Trump does. He's not on the campaign trail. I mean, he's not. And I'm almost thinking, Pete, here's my view, particularly as Trump supporters. And you and I have supported the president in the past, and maybe will likely in the future. But I think the average American, they put themselves in Trump's position and say, my God, if they can go after Trump like this, they can go after me, they can go after my friends, my business associates. And I think his polling numbers went up because they see a guy fighting back. And so many Americans, think about this, Gary, the right track, wrong country, 72% wrong track, 28% right track. Is Joe Biden too old to run? 70% yes. But the overlying piece to this is people are fed up with government. They don't feel government is helping them out. They feel inflation is breaking their back, despite the good report we got today, which we'll try to squeeze in. But Gary, that's my thoughts. They see Trump fighting the system about what they view as unfavorable treatment. What say you on this?
Yeah, in fact, one of Trump's lawyers in the New York case came out on the steps of the courthouse and said, "Look, you can agree or disagree with Donald Trump, but what's happening there could happen to anyone, and Donald Trump has a microphone to tell people about this, and most of us don't. And these things are done, and no one ever hears about them. And liberals or conservatives, do you want to?" Do you want to be put in the position of someone doing an evaluation of your property and because there's some political deal behind it all, there's somebody in your community that wants to put a high rise in over here and so forth, and they're going to devalue this and over that. This is all of us, and it's unfortunate that this is taking place. But I think this is Donald Trump's campaign. This is all part of his campaign. He's still going around speaking across the country. They're trying to give a gag order on the guy, and he continues to speak out. And he says, "Look, find me whatever you do." He said, "This is unconstitutional. They have freedom of speech. I want to address these particular issues, and I'm going to do so. And I don't care what the judge has to say." I think it's great. I really do.
Yeah, and I think your voice, Gary, is representative not only of Trump supporters, but a lot of independents feel this way too. And, it really galls me when I hear Biden come out, or these Kamala Harris or some of these liberal politicians say, well, it's that MAGA crowd, the MAGA people. They're trying to talk down to people, down to voters, a big swath of the country that supports this. And Gary, for them to say, okay, hey, listen, we had a great night on Tuesday. Look, the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden was not on the ballot Tuesday. Okay? Donald Trump wasn't on that ballot. You look at turnout in some of these states, Kentucky in particular. The turnout when Donald Trump's name is on that ballot is 40% greater than what we saw in an off-year election. So, I mean, for people to try to give Joe Biden a pass, and yes, I'm not going to get into the abortion issue because there's some issues beyond that. We don't have time for that. But when people take into the fact that when Trump's name's on this ballot, you and I even talked about it last year, with 7 swing states out there and Trump leading in 5 of them, and Democratic operatives like Axelrod coming out and saying he's too old, he needs to look to get off the ticket. When all that type of things is happening, this is not happening in a vacuum. If Axelrod is saying it, prominent other Democrats are saying it. And Gary, in your opinion, can someone else replace Biden, or is it too late at this point, and is the die sort of cast?
Well, I don't think it's too late. The question is who would do it. Of course, you got Newsom from California. I think he would be a bust. All you have to do is just say, look, if you want the rest of your country to look like California when people are leaving the state, and look at what's happening with the homeless population, then go ahead, go vote for Newsom. You hear periodically that it's going to be Michelle Obama, that she's going to come in and rescue the Democrat Party. I'm not sure that the Obamas would want to do that. They're making way too much money right now, and I think there would be a backlash among conservative men. I think they would come out and say, "Look, I haven't voted in the last 2 elections, but I'm going to vote in this election." So because she's basically, I think, a whole lot worse than Hillary Clinton, and so this is. Politically, you mentioned what happened in Virginia with all of this, but this was an off-year election, and I don't think you can gauge what's going to take place in a presidential election in terms of an off-year election. And I would have to say one other thing: it's not enough to vote against the Democrats, and this is, I think, one of the faults of the GOP. Vote for us because we're not Democrats. I think the American people want to hear from the Republicans. Tell us what you're going to do. Don't just tell us stuff, but tell us what you are actually going to do and do it. And I don't think the GOP gives voters enough of this is what we're going to do, and we're going to follow through with it. And I think that's what happened to McCarthy. It's how he lost his speaker position. The question: do what you're going to say you're going to do, and we'll vote for you.
Whether you agree with new Speaker Mike Johnson or not, I happen to like him a lot. And Gary, I want to give you a minute here before we close out. You had some thoughts about how Mike Johnson's being treated as Speaker. Mike Johnson is a core conservative. He has his beliefs. There's nothing phony about Mike Johnson. But Gary, tell our audience a story about what he's dealing with as a result of his faith.
Oh yeah, they're attacking him because of his Christian faith, because he believes the Bible. Look, there are tens of millions of people here in the United States who go to church every Sunday and who are Christians who believe the Bible. And look, anybody who has any understanding of the development of the Western civilization, it's based upon biblical principles. All you have to, I wrote a book recently, just published a book called The Case for America's Christian Heritage, and it lays out all of these things. You look at the original state constitutions, you look at days of prayer and fasting. The Constitution of the United States says it's done in the year of our Lord 1787. There are 4 or 5 references in the Declaration of Independence. You go on down the line with all of this. This is what fundamentally made the United States. And he did an interview just recently, and someone said, "What about the separation between church and state?" And the speaker said, "Look, that phrase is not found in the Constitution. It was a letter that Thomas Jefferson had written to Baptists, and this was in 1802. It was to keep the federal government out of the churches. The Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment, is very clear. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." It was to keep the federal government from telling the states what they were to do in terms of religion. No one is calling for the government of the United States to force people to become Christian or anything else. It was to keep the national government out of our lives in terms of who you're going to sell a cake to, and who are you going to photograph, and who are you going to make a website for, in terms of what's happening in terms of homosexuality and transgenderism. So, yeah,
Gary, I
think he's done a great job.
With that, Gary, I got to say thank you for coming back on the show. I'm going to have you back soon. Folks, we're out of time. See you on Thursday.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900.